There's a new law, analogous to Moore's law, called Haight's law, named after Dr. Roland Haight's, a now retired scientist at Agilent Technologies, which states that every decade, the cost per lumen falls by a factor of 10. The amount of light generated per LED package increases by a factor of 20 for a given wavelength of color of light. So, we've established that solid-state light has matured to the point of being feasible for motion picture lighting from the perspective of efficiency, service life, and versatility, all highly desirable attributes. But what of color? Arguably the most important attribute for an illuminant in our field. Let's take a look at the spectral sensitivity curves for 5218, to which we can add the line for tungsten. Well, that's pretty straightforward. So let's take a look at a Macbeth chart together with the 5218 sensitivity curves, showing how the chart would change if exposed from 32 tungsten to daylight. So this is what happens to color rendering with changes to a continuous curve source. What then happens if the source is not continuous? For several years now, it's been possible to buy lamps with neodymium built into the glass envelope. They're sold under various trade names such as Chromolux. Reveal is the GE version, and Daylight Plus is the Osram Sylvania version. As you can see, it's quite interesting. It has the ability to transform a continuous source, in this case tungsten, into a discontinuous source. But the point of this demonstration is that disrupting the continuous emission spectrum will have an effect on color rendering, flattering or not, as the case may be. When it's a deliberate choice and under our control, it's an artistic effect. If not, it's an artifact. And as such, it can incur incredible expense to fix in post, if indeed it's possible at all. This is very much in the same vein as the case for bleach bypass, which, if it happens by accident at the lab, would be regarded as a catastrophic error, resulting in lawsuits, whereas, if called for by the director of photography, it's art. There are various ways of providing a discontinuous light source. Most discharge lighting has a discontinuous spectral energy distribution. This includes HMI, fluorescent, and if we can classify them as such, solid-state lights. As you can see from the difference in these lines, it's no wonder that our test images with different lighting conditions recorded differently on film. I mentioned earlier that the Council had conducted a survey of fluorescent sources. The Council performs such projects at the Academy Pickford Centre on the Esmeralda stage, a laboratory for testing many aspects of cinema technology. To assess lighting technology, we employ a special setup as shown here. This is a split-screen Macbeth, and for those not familiar with it, an oversized Macbeth chart, 40 inches wide, is mounted on the main easel, and a trifold flat is placed between the camera and the main easel, and the center panel of the trifold flat contains a smaller version of the Macbeth chart, approximately 18 inches wide, with the upper half of each color chip removed. And when properly aligned and viewed from the camera position, the foreground chart lines up perfectly with the background chart. It's then possible to illuminate the foreground chart with the test light and the background chart with a standard reference illuminant. So, here is our split Macbeth showing the effect of the enhancer or neodymium filter in the lower portion with the normal continuous tungsten emission in the upper half. Another way to perceive the effect of a discontinuous source is to view it through what's called a rainbow glass, technically an interference filter. This is such a filter with a standard tungsten source. And here we can see the effect of introducing the neodymium filter. It's obvious the 580 nanometer region is essentially wiped out. Okay, now let's take a look at a fluorescent light source using these two techniques. Here's our film curves with tungsten, and now we'll add the fluorescence. It can readily be seen that the spectral power distribution of the fluorescent and the spectral sensitivity curve for the film stock are not entirely in accord. The design of a fluorescent tungsten lamp, the pink line, attempts to match the spectral trace for actual tungsten, the yellow line. The spiky nature of the combination of phosphors and the mercury emission basic to the fluorescent lamp make a perfect match impossible. Cascade that discrepancy with the differing spectral sensitivity curves for a variety of film stocks, the blue, green, and red lines, or for various digital cameras, and the engineering task becomes formidable, as relatively minor changes of any factor can produce a significantly different result. The effect can be seen in the split-screen Macbeth here, and the disparity between the tungsten distribution and the fluorescent is quite obvious when we look at the rainbow glass image. It would require another custom blend of phosphors to match another film stock, and likewise a specific blend for each flavor of digital camera.